Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Academy of Wisdom and Enlightenment. My name is Professor Dr. Cheng Lo. I'm the principal of the Academy. Today, our very first lecture in our Year 1 syllabus will be taught by Ms. Jenny Chan, an instructor, and the topic is holistic health. Now, why does the Academy chooses holistic health as the very first and foremost lecture in the beginning of the Year 1 curriculum? Well, I'm going to highlight her lecture in the following points. Her lecture has two main themes. First of all, the lecture exposed the student to holistic thinking right at the beginning of the entire course of our Academy's curriculum. Holistic thinking is extremely important because all enlightened beings has a holistic thinking mode. You will find this theme of holistic thinking permeates throughout her lecture. Point 1a. Under the theme of holistic health, Jenny will unite the whole population, whether one is an atheist, a theist, or Buddhist. Then point 1b is, among the Buddhists, this banner of holistic health would explain and reunite all the diverse traditions and schools of Buddhism. So that is the first point about her lecture. And the second, and even more important point is that this lecture will establish spirituality as the number one priority in our lives. I know we all live very busy lives. In the long term, there are career to build, family to raise, mortgage to pay, etc. In the short term, the shoppings to do, dinner to cook, laundry to wash, kids to drive, places to go. So in this topsy-turvy kind of livelihood, it makes us forget, what are we here for? What's the meaning of life? What is the priority of life? So at the end of this lecture, I hope it will be clear to the students and the audience that spirituality should be the number one priority in our life. So without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ms. Jenny Chan.
Dear Venerable, friends in the Dharma, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Jenny from the Academy of Wisdom and Enlightenment, in AWE in short. Thank you for coming to my talk. The topic is, what is holistic health? Before I talk about holistic health, allow me to talk about holistic first. When we think of holistic, we think of wholesome, all-inclusive, integration, unification, and totality. These are the ingredients of holism. As opposed to being holistic, we have fragmentation, which includes unhealthy, exclusion, segregation, separation, split, or divide. So, what do you think of our world today? Is it best to describe our world as holistic or fragmented? The problem of our world today is that fragmentation exists everywhere. In fact, we see fragmentation throughout, from families, societies, all the way to nations. For a good overview of conflict within and amongst nations in our world today, please refer to the paper by the Most Venerable Dr. Sumana Siri Tripitaka Vakishvaracharya. The title of his paper is The Buddha's Moral Politics for Conflict Resolution. Now we should remember, Buddhism is a wholesome religion, and therefore it is a great remedy for fragmentation. To quote Albert Einstein, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. To paraphrase Einstein, He is saying that problems caused by fragmented thinking cannot be solved by the same fragmented mindset. We propose holism is the solution. Having finished describing holistic, let's talk about health. So health is something that speaks to all. It is a common denominator. Most people think of health as 1, physical, and 2, mental. Indeed, the World Health Organization's definition of health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This definition suits the atheists and agnostics very well. But at AWE, we want to include spirituality as another component of holistic health. And then with physical, mental, and spiritual health, with all 3 aspects, we will have holistic health. Establish spirituality. Now, how can spirituality be distinguished from the mental faculty? Is spirituality something we just imagine, or something that our minds create, and is it real? Well, the reality of spirituality can be derived from at least 3 lines of evidences, namely near-death experience, rebirth, and past life. First, there is scientific documentation of near-death experiences, NDE, by cardiologists on flatliner patients who came back to life. In the next slide, I'll show you that NDE have been confirmed by independent teams worldwide. The second line of evidence is scientific studies about 3,000 cases of rebirth by Dr. Ian Stevenson, Director of the Division of Personality Studies at the University of Virginia. The third line of evidence is past life regressive hypnosis by Dr. Brian Weiss, Head of Psychiatry, Mount Sinai Medical Center, Miami. So we can see the 3 lines of evidences produced by medical doctors and scientists, which clearly distinguish spirituality being a separate entity from the mental faculty. I'm going to show you in the next slide independent team studies. These include cardiological teams from the UK, Netherlands, and United States. These are reputable medical schools. From these studies, they found NDE occurred anywhere from 10 to 25% of patients who had cardiac arrest. Interestingly, near-death experience enhanced spirituality in cardiac arrest survivors, and those without NDE, the survivors' spirituality decreased after heart attacks. Frequency of NDE features reported. Some of the common features reported include pleasant feelings, seeing a tunnel, a light, deceased relatives, a life's review or out-of-body experience that enabled the patient to see, quote and unquote, nurses, physicians, and family in and around the intensive care unit. At AWE, we employ critical thinking to identify as direct evidence. Therefore, we consider none of the above features as convincing evidences for near-death experiences because, 1, the patients could have learned about these common features prior to their cardiac arrest incidents. It is arguable that they might have mistaken the memory of their prior knowledge as NDE. Oxygen deprivation to the brain could have caused such confusion. 2, the report on the hospital surroundings and personnel are ordinary scenery that the brain can synthesize through juxtaposition. AWE proposes that the criterion for direct evidence of genuine NDE is the ability of the patient to acquire specific and detailed knowledge, as opposed to general knowledge, that the patient has no conceivable means of knowing. Under this stringent criterion, several of these direct and convincing NDE cases are cited below. One, in the Sacred Heart Hospital, Spokane, Washington, cardiologist Dr. Lloyd Rudy gave the following account of what his NDE patient described. Floating around over the operating room. I saw you, Dr. Rudy and Dr. Catania, standing in the doorway with their arms folded and talking. I didn't know where the anesthesiologist was, but I saw him come running back in. And I saw all these post-its, sticky notes, the nurses stuck on the monitor screen about new phone calls for Dr. Rudy that had come in during the operation. In short, the dead patient described what everyone had been doing, including a discussion outside the room, a stack of sticky notes of incoming phone calls, etc. Things no way he could have known because he was wheeled to the recovery room, regained consciousness 2 days later. 2. Barrow Neurological Institute, Phoenix, Arizona. Neurosurgeon Dr. Robert Spatzler performed a brain operation on Pam Reynolds Lowry. Her experience is one of the most notable and widely documented in near-death experience studies. Reynolds was under close medical monitoring during the entire operation. During part of the operation, she had no brain wave activity and no blood flowing into her brain, which rendered her clinically dead. Her pre-operative preparations included plugging each ear with clicking devices to monitor the brain activity, and her eyes were taped shut. Her auditory and sight faculty senses were totally blocked. Therefore, there was no way she could hear and see what was going on. Yet she was able to describe the shapes and sizes of the surgical instruments used on her, and accurately recalled the conversation between the operating room staffs. 3. In Reinhardt Hospital, Arnhem, Holland, cardiologist Dr. Pim van Lommel described a man who suffered a severe heart attack, during which time he displayed 3 critical signs of clinical death, was in coma for a week, and later brought back to the ward. The nurse who was there during the resuscitation came in for the first time. Immediately the man said, "You're the one. You took my dentures and put them in the sliding drawer underneath the cot with all those bottles." The nurse was flabbergasted. It is not possible. He was in deep coma, could not see anything. During the period of his deep coma, the patient experienced out-of-body perception, which allowed him to describe accurately what the doctors and nurses have done. Without being redundant, numerous other cases that fit the AWE stringent criterion can be found in published literature by Penny Sartori, 2014, Pim van Lommel, 2011, Michael Sabom, 2007. You can locate this literature in the reference section of my full article. Now, the critical lessons we have learned from the NDE studies is death is not the end. Something happens after death. That something is consciousness. That consciousness is capable of perceiving physical realities. The clinically dead person's perceptions are independent of the 6 senses. That is sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, and Indraya, the brain function. Here are some examples of direct and convincing near-death experience cases. Please refer to my article where you can find these links to view and enjoy at your own leisure. Having established that spirituality indeed is so real and a valid entity of the three components of holistic health, we should set spirituality as life's priority. Why? Especially as Buddhists, spirituality is one of the central teachings of Buddhism. We have all these scientific data to induce and ignite interest amongst atheists who are not spiritual. That is not easy because sentient beings give physical health first priority. Why? Because most people see anything physical as tangible, and physical values are akin to materialistic values. The next component is mental. Mental is more abstract by getting more attention and fewer stigmas these days. It used to be a very bad stigma or taboo to be sick with mental illness. As spirituality is most abstract, in other words, one needs a higher level of consciousness and awareness to acknowledge and cherish this as one of the three components of holistic health. Spirituality is the most important component. Now, Buddhism is all about raising one's level of consciousness and awareness. So that is why spirituality fits very well in our Buddhist agenda, namely to promote holistic health. We recognize that there are many traditions in Buddhism. Example, in the Tibetan tradition, they are exuberantly chanting mantras, trumpets, drums and bells, make some noise. In the Vajrayana tradition, Dhamma practice is celebrated every time. In contrast, the Zen tradition observes a lot in silence. On the surface, Buddhism seems to be fragmented. Well, under the banner concept of holistic health, we see that Theravada tradition is very strong in training and disciplines of the mind. On the other hand, the Chinese Zen puts a lot of emphasis on understanding the workings of the mind. We can see that the Theravada and Zen traditions both emphasize on the mental component of holistic health. Vajrayana and Mahayana traditions have different ideologies. The ideology is based on Bodhisattva's liberation of sentient beings by endless reincarnation. This is their way to moksha. So in the Vajrayana tradition, we see their beliefs in reincarnations of Rinpoche and living Buddhas. And in the Mahayana tradition, we have Ksitigarbha, the hellraiser, whose vow is never to attain Buddhahood until all hells break loose. So in other words, in Vajrayana and Mahayana tradition, we can see that both traditions emphasize the spiritual component of holistic health. We see that holistic health can speak to everybody, and different Buddhist traditions can all be united under the concept of holistic health. Even the theists, atheists, and agnostics will be enticed. So in conclusion, AWE's first and foremost lecture in Year 1 University curriculum is holistic health. And we introduced holistic thinking to new students at the very beginning of class. This educational topic of holistic health subscribes to 3 of the conference's sub-themes. 1, Buddhist contribution to healthy living. 2, holism is conflict resolution. And 3, Buddhist education and university level curriculum. Thank you.